everyone, it's Emily, and today I'm here to do my January wrap-up. I read a lot in January, which is really exciting. I enjoyed almost everything that I read, which is also very exciting. I probably should have done a mid-month wrap-up because I'm gonna have to fly through these, or it would be a really long video. So I'm just gonna jump straight in and get to the stuff that'll be pretty quick to get through. One, I finished Chamber of Secrets finally, so I'm not even gonna talk about it. I love Harry Potter, so it was amazing to reread and actually annotate. I also read Night of Cake and Puppets by Laini Taylor, and this is amazing because it also has gorgeous artwork throughout it. If I can actually find an example. So it's got different artwork throughout it by Laini Taylor's husband, which is pretty cool. And this is a just quick side novella in the Daughter Smoke and Bone series that follows Mick and Susanna. And it's precious. It's just their love story. It's so cute. It's just so pure and wonderful. So if you like the Daughter Smoke and Bone series and you want to follow two of the best characters in that series, who are just my everything, yeah, read this. Speaking of precious novellas, I also read The Gentleman's Guide to Getting Lucky, and this is by Mackenzie Lee. This is in the Montague sibling series. This follows Monty and Percy, and it's after the events of A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. So it just follows them right after that. And it's just so precious. It's so short. It's huge font, double space, and it's 100 pages, so it's really quick to get through, but it's just so heartwarming because I love Monty and Percy so much. So thoroughly enjoyed, unsurprisingly. Also read The Starless Sea. I have a separate review for this one, so I'll be sure to link that. Wasn't a perfect book for me, but I really, really loved it overall. So I will, as I said, link that below to so that you can have my full thoughts on that one. So I also listened to the audiobook of Contact by Carl Sagan. This is such a comfort story for me. I grew up watching the movie. I've seen it so many times, and I love that story so much. So I was really, really hoping that reading the book would kind of bring me that same comfort, and that I would really love the actual book as well as the movie. And I'm so happy to say that I absolutely loved this book. Ellie is one of my favorite characters ever. She is a scientist and a physicist and astronomer. She is working with SETI. She's working essentially to see if there are signals from other civilizations in space, and gets a lot of pushback. She's one of not too many women in this field, and so she's really had to kind of claw her way for every win that she has had in her career. And she and her team ultimately do find a signal that seems to be coming from another star system, and it's about the outcome of that. It's about how the world reacts to that, and them interpreting this message and deciding whether or not they're going to heed what the message says and kind of how that all shakes out. It's a very simple writing style, but I think it works really well for the story, and just the musings that he has about some really deep stuff too is just so interesting. And I love Carl Sagan. I also grew up watching Cosmos, so I love Carl Sagan, and I love the writing, I love the story. It gave me that same feeling, and so very happy that I read this one. So I also listened to Renegades as well as Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer, and I really enjoyed the audiobooks for these. They've got two narrators, one for the two main characters, and it's not necessarily like chapters going back and forth specifically from their points of view, but the chapters do kind of tend to focus more on one character than the other for the most part, and so they kind of divide the chapters up, and so every few chapters you'll kind of switch perspectives. And I really enjoyed the narrators, and overall this was actually really fun. I had a great time listening to this. And this follows Nova and Adrian. Nova's an anarchist and Adrian is a renegade, and it's a superhero story, and these two groups, although they both have different powers and abilities, those two groups don't get along for reasons that have to do with their history and kind of how people with power have been treated in the past in the society, and how people with these powers kind of ultimately prevailed, but there was kind of a rift in their history that has pervaded to this day. And so it's about the past of these two coming together and them learning from each other and just their experiences. And that's really all I'm going to say, because I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't read this series. But it's not, you know, I think it'd be a favorite series of all time. I think she could have gone a bit more in depth with some things. And I think, you know, in parts it kind of got repetitive with her, you know, getting the message across that, you know, good people aren't always as good as you think they are, bad people aren't always as bad as you think they are. But I think she could have kind of dug into that meat a little bit more than she does in this series, and kind of a little bit more that I would have wanted out of it in that sense. I think she could have gone deeper. But it was just entertaining. I think the pacing in these two books was really good. You know, definitely overall a fast pace, but I still think she developed the characters pretty well. And I actually really liked Nova and Adrian's dynamic. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But I actually really like their dynamic, and I didn't think that I would. But I actually really did. I really did, and I was surprised by that. So yeah, overall, such a fun two books. I've got Supernova, the final book, came out late last year. I've got it on hold at the library. I might also use an Audible credit to get the audiobook of that one, because it's quite a wait on the library's hold. We'll see. But I might be listening to, I'll at least be listening to the last one of this one later this spring, and maybe sooner, depending on how much restraint I can have. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed that one. I also listened to the second book in this series, and that is Lady Smoke by Laura Sebastian. So I'm just going to hold this one up so that I don't need to edit in a different picture. But I read Lady Smoke, or listened to Lady Smoke on audio, and this one I feel actually pretty much the same as this one. Actually, the second one's kind of different. So this one follows, let's start there, shall we? So this one follows Theodosia, and she is a princess. Her mother was actually killed as a group kind of invaded their country, and the people who invaded kind of took over the palace and took over political leadership, and she basically has been held prisoner. And so the first one kind of involves her at the palace, and the second one follows kind of a very different, it's a very different setting, and it's a very different set of events that are far more political than action-based. And so I personally still really liked it, even though it was pretty different than the first one. I still really enjoy the political side to fantasies like this, and enjoying exploring those dynamics and not just kind of the action. And so I still really enjoyed the second one, and I think it's setting up a really interesting third book. The third book in this was actually just published on Tuesday. I'm filming this on Wednesday the 5th. It just came out yesterday, and I think the second book is setting up a really interesting third one that I think might combine kind of the action and the politics in a really interesting way. But I think I think she needed to set up both in order to maximize what could happen in that third book. So I kind of see the point of a lot of what happened in Lady Smoke, and I can appreciate that. So I still had a really good time listening to it, and am excited for the third one. I'm gonna find it on audio, I think, somewhere, because I've really enjoyed listening to these on audio, and I also don't have a copy of the third one, so I think I'm just gonna try to find the audio somewhere and go from there. But yeah, overall enjoyable. Again, I don't think that's gonna be a favorite series of all time. It's definitely a little bit tropey, but overall entertaining, fun to listen to. Another series that I actually read it's a duology, and I read both of them in January, and that is The Crown's Game and The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye. And these were also just really, these were also a lot of fun. So I listened to them on audio. Mostly there were times where I was physically reading while listening to the audio, and there were times where I was just listening to the audio. And this one follows Vika. She is an enchanter, and in her world, basically there's one enchanter that's kind of powerful enough to be the Emperor's kind of personal enchanter. And it's a very rare occurrence for there to be a second one who's powerful enough, and if there ever is, they must engage in the Crown's Game, and they must essentially battle to the death, and then the survivor becomes the king's enchanter. And so Vika realizes that there's another enchanter, and it goes from there. And, you know, a little bit tropey, a little bit predictable, but I still honestly just had a really fun time with this book. It definitely, the atmosphere was super cool. I loved the little details that she put about the world, and, you know, I really like the main sets of characters. There was one that honestly really reminded me of Monty from the Montague siblings series. I definitely just thought about him the whole time when this character said anything. I was like, that's something Monty would have said. But, you know, entertaining, and it's kind of a fun, you know, set of twisted turns where you don't really know who to trust, but there still were some things that were, I guess, pretty predictable. But overall, would definitely recommend, especially reading it in the winter, because it was really fun to read this while it was cold outside. So, yeah. I also listened to The Library Book by Susan Orlean. This was fascinating. This is one of the coolest nonfictions I've read in a fair bit. This is also on my list of nonfictions that I wanted to get to in 2020. I'll be sure to link that below as well. Or I think it was just like a list of nonfictions I want to get to soon, and this was on there. I absolutely love this. So Susan Orlean herself narrates the audiobook. So this starts by talking about and I guess the central lens for her to talk about libraries is a fire that happened at the Los Angeles Central Library back in the 1980s. And so she starts out by talking about the fire, talking about the response to the fire, talking about the suspect that, you know, was kind of the main focus of the investigation. So she starts there and kind of expands out to talk about libraries in general, kind of the role that libraries have played in society, and the future of libraries. She talks about the history of libraries in general, and the history of the Los Angeles Library in particular. And there are some really, really fascinating and interesting characters that have been involved or, you know, played a role in the Los Angeles Public Library over its history. Really interesting people, and there are some really badass women too who were critical not just to the Los Angeles Public Library being what it is, but the library system as we know it today being what it is. And this was just fascinating. And I also this is my favorite style of nonfiction storytelling, and the writing style kind of reminded me of Elizabeth Kolbert, where she's telling this story and it's very clear kind of why she's telling this story and why it's so important to her, but she also incorporates personal elements. And so Susan also talks about her personal experience with libraries and why she finds this story so important, and kind of talks about the process of her actually researching and writing this book, and integrates that into relevant areas to kind of add some context, add some flavor, and kind of really drive home why this story is so important. And I love that method of nonfiction storytelling, and so I honestly cannot recommend this highly enough. I thought it was so interesting. Yeah, loved this. Love this. I honestly could see myself rereading this and loaning it out to all of my friends. And last but certainly not least, I read The City of Brass and Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakravorty. And I'll just hold this one up because I don't want to hold, they're heavy. I don't want to hold both of them up. So I listened to these, I did a mix again of listening to it on audio and reading physically while listening to it on audio as well. So I kind of went back and forth. And I enjoyed the narrator for this one a lot. She was awesome. And this one follows a few main characters. This follows Nari, and she lives in Cairo, and she has interesting abilities and powers that she doesn't quite understand. She has special abilities with language, special abilities with healing, and she's basically just kind of doing what she can to survive in Cairo. And in the process of going through a healing ceremony, she accidentally summons a warrior djinn. In that process, she essentially has to escape with this warrior djinn and go to the city of brass, Davabad, and gets integrated in interesting ways into djinn politics and djinn court life. And there are a lot of different groups that are part of this society, and they all have interesting histories that relate to each other in interesting ways and complicated ways. And so she's kind of thrust into the middle of this. I also follow the prince in this city, and he, you know, is kind of already in the thick of things, and you know, you follow him trying to do the best for his people, and he definitely has very different views about how these different groups should relate to each other. And so his path and Nari's path cross, and yeah, it kind of goes from there. And I freaking love, like, these are probably my favorite reads of the month, and will probably be, I would be shocked if these were not on my favorites of the year list by the end of the year. The third one is coming out this summer, late spring, early summer. I'll need to double check the date, but the third one is coming out this year. I'm pumped. I absolutely love, like, the politics was so fascinating in this world. The world building, fantastic. This world was so interesting and colorful. The pacing was really, really good. I thought there was a good mix of lots of action and some twists and turns, some of which I didn't see coming. Quite a few of them I didn't see coming, but also just some still moments to really get to know these characters. And so I thought there was a really good balance between those two. You know, the world expands in the second one, and you can just kind of see all of these pieces coming together in different parts of the world with these different groups. And so you can kind of see different things going on in different parts of the world that just kind of expands it and just makes it even more interesting than it already was. So I'm so excited to see where things go in the third one. I love the characters. As I said, Nari is fan-freaking-tastic, and I love her as a main character so much. Sometimes you want to scream at her, but you also just, I want her to be my best friend. Yeah, I love her. So I would highly recommend, if you have not picked these up. Loved them so much. So actually that wasn't last. The last book, the actual last book that I'm going to talk about, and this one I will pop up a picture here, and that is The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. I listened to this one on audio. I listened to the other two on audio as well in the fall, and I was thinking about waiting because these were so cool to read in the fall. Just atmospherically, they were so cool to read in the fall. But I couldn't wait, and I saw the third one was on Scribd. So I basically just devoured it in one day. Like, I just devoured it in one day, and it was so good. I love this whole series. So the series follows Stevie. She is solving the mystery at Ellingham Academy, and this is kind of a special school in the Northeast where students get to kind of focus on their talents and their passions. And hers is solving mysteries, and she wants to solve the kidnapping and murder case that happened at the school's founding that's remained solved all of these decades. And it's also starting to, as she's investigating this, some creepy things and some scary things are starting to happen in present day at the school, and so she needs to figure out both mysteries and figure out how they're tied together. I love this series. I really liked the way it ended. I thought she did a really good job tying all the loose ends, tying everything together. I still love Stevie and all of the other characters. There's also amazing rep in this story too. There are a whole bunch of really interesting people at this school. There's a non-binary student. There are a lot of really cool people at this school and some really lovable characters. And I love Stevie's tenacity. Sometimes too stubborn, but you love her, and she just will stop at nothing to solve this mystery and make sure that the people around her are safe. And yeah, I think there's, again, a good balance of, so you kind of go back and forth between these two timelines of the opening of the school and present day. And I think it's just such a cool element to go back and forth. Like, I think she does it at a good pace. Like, you're not constantly flipping back and forth for it to kind of be too much. But you do get these flashbacks that really provide a really cool layer to the story. And I just think the pacing is really good in these. There's, again, you get to know the characters, but there's also not really too many dull moments. Like, there's always something happening that Stevie needs to get her way out of. And it's just, And you can also kind of see, I really appreciate mysteries like this where you kind of see how the pieces come together. Like, it always frustrates me if, the answer is revealed and it's clear that the pieces weren't there for you to be able to piece together. The pieces were there, and so it's really cool to kind of see them all come together and see Stevie figure it out. Anyway, loved it, and that is everything I read in January. A lot of audiobooks, so many audiobooks, but I loved so much of what I read. Even if it's not all, new favorite series of all times, I think almost everything that I read was still at least super entertaining, which, also counts for a lot. So let me know if you've read any of these books or series and what you thought of them. Let me know what you're reading in January. I would love to know. And I'll be sure to leave my Twitter and Instagram link down below. That's where I like to hang out. I've got a bookish one and a personal/climate change sustainability Twitter and Instagram, as well as my climate change channel that I'll leave linked down below. And yeah, with that, please subscribe for more bookish content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.